The massive alien ship floated in space like a metal city. Taimin could see it through the small window of his transport shuttle. The ship was so big it blocked out the stars. Commander Taimin checked his tablet one more time and smiled. He was about to meet aliens for the first time in human history. The Galactic Council had been preparing for months. They sent their best scientists, their most powerful computers, and enough equipment to fill 3 cargo ships. The humans were sending one man with a tablet and a small bag ambassador. Keth stood in the docking bay with 12 other aliens. Each one came from a different planet. Each one looked completely different from the others. Some had tentacles, some had scales, some glowed with their own light. But they all had the same expression on their faces. They were confused. Where were the hundreds of human scientists? Where were the massive machines? Where were the quantum computers that every species brought when they joined the Council? Taimin walked off his shuttle carrying only his tablet and looking around with bright, curious eyes. "Welcome to Council Station Prime," said Ambassador Keith in perfect human language. "We have prepared extensive facilities for your research. Teams." "Thank you," said Taimin. "I'm ready to begin." Keth looked around the empty docking bay. "But where are your teams? Your equipment? Your computational systems?" Taimin tapped his temple. "I have everything I need right here." The aliens exchanged glances. This was not how first contact was supposed to work. Every species brought massive delegations showing off their best technology, proving they belonged in the galactic community. Humans had sent one man with a tablet. Dr. Yon-Su watched from Earth. Through a video link, she could see the confusion on the alien faces. They had no idea what they were about to experience. Humans did not need big machines to be smart. They just needed their minds and their willingness to ask the right questions. The tour began in the engineering section. The aliens showed Taimin, their pride and joy, a massive computer system that calculated hyperspace jump coordinates. The machine filled an entire room and hummed with power. It took 6 technicians to operate, and could calculate one jump route every 3 hours. "Very impressive," said Taimin, looking at the readouts. "But why do you use such a complex approach?" The lead engineer, a being with 4 arms and crystal skin, explained. "The mathematics are incredibly difficult. The variables are nearly infinite. We must account for gravitational fields, stellar drift, temporal fluctuations, and quantum uncertainties." Taimin nodded and pulled out his tablet. "May I?" He began sketching simple diagrams and writing basic equations. Within 10 minutes, he had drawn a completely different approach. Instead of calculating every variable separately, he showed how to use the variables to cancel each other out. "You could reduce your calculation time from 3 hours to 3 minutes, he said politely. "And you would only need 1 operator instead of 6. The alien engineers stared at his tablet. The equations were so simple a child could understand them. But they worked. They actually worked better than their complex system. In the medical bay, Dr. Sung-Mi was having a similar conversation. The aliens showed her their advanced healing chambers that used quantum field manipulation to repair cellular damage. The process took weeks and required enormous amounts of energy. "Fascinating," said Sung-Mi. "But have you considered using targeted protein synthesis instead?" The alien doctors looked confused. "What is that?" Sung-Mi explained how human doctors had learned to program the body to heal itself, using its own systems. It was faster, safer, and required no external energy. The aliens realized they had been trying to force healing, when they could have been encouraging it. By the end of the first day, the aliens were asking each other the same question. How are humans this smart? They had expected to teach the humans about advanced technology. Instead, the humans were teaching them. Ambassador Keith called an emergency meeting. The other council members gathered in the conference room. Their faces showed worry and confusion. "These humans," she said. "They solve problems we have worked on for decades. They do it in minutes using basic principles we all learned in school. How is this possible? Maybe they are more advanced than they appear," suggested one member. "Maybe they are hiding their true technology. But our scans show their homeworld has primitive technology compared to ours. Their cities use simple fusion power. Their ships are basic metal constructs. They have no quantum computers, no dimensional manipulators, no exotic Matter processors. Then how do they think so clearly? Dr. Yun-Su continued watching from Earth. She could see the alien leaders struggling to understand. They thought intelligence meant big machines and complex systems. Humans had learned that intelligence meant seeing simple solutions to complex problems. Taemin was in his quarters writing his daily report to Earth. The aliens were kind and eager to learn. They had built amazing things, but they made everything much harder than it needed to be tomorrow. He would visit their physics laboratory. He was curious to see what other problems they were overcomplicating. The next morning brought new surprises. The physics team showed Taemin their latest project, a device for generating clean energy. They had been working on it for 30 years. The machine used controlled black holes to extract energy from quantum vacuum fluctuations. Taemin studied their blueprints for an hour, then asked a simple question. Why not use fusion like we do on Earth? The alien physicists explained that fusion was too primitive, too limited, too dangerous. But what if you scale it up differently, suggested Taemin. What if you use multiple small reactors instead of one big one? What if you use the waste heat to power secondary systems? What if you build them in space where accidents cannot hurt anyone? He showed them designs that human engineers had been using for 50 years, simple, reliable, safe, and efficient. The aliens realized their complex solution was actually less effective than the human approach word spread through the station. The humans were not just smart, they thought in ways that made problems seem easy. Things that seemed impossible to alien minds were obvious to human minds. Engineer Hyun-woo arrived. The next day he looked at their manufacturing systems and immediately saw dozens of improvements. Not through better technology, but through better organization, better workflow, better use of existing resources. Dr. Boram revolutionized their food production by suggesting they grow plants the way humans had been doing for thousands of years. Instead of complex chemical synthesis, she showed them how to use natural biological processes. Each human that arrived brought the same gift: they could see simple solutions that aliens missed. They could cut through complex problems with basic logic. They could make the impossible seem easy. The aliens began to understand they were not meeting a more advanced species. They were meeting a species that thought differently. Humans did not build complex systems to show how smart they were. They built simple systems that actually worked. Ambassador Keth stood at the observation deck watching human and alien teams work together for the first time. In her long career, she was seeing real innovation. Problems that had seemed unsolvable for generations were being solved in days. The question had changed from, how are humans this smart? To why had everyone else been thinking so inefficiently? The answer would reshape the entire galaxy. 3 weeks had passed since the humans arrived at Council Station Prime. The entire facility was in chaos. Every department that worked with human observers was reporting the same impossible results. Problems that required their most advanced computers and brightest minds were being solved by humans using nothing but basic logic. Engineer Hyun-woo had been assigned to observe the quantum mining operations deep in the asteroid belt. The aliens had built massive extraction machines the size of small cities. These machines could break down asteroids at the molecular level and separate valuable materials with incredible precision. The process took months for each asteroid and required enormous amounts of energy. Hyun-woo watched the operation for 2 days, then politely asked to speak with the chief engineer. "This is very impressive," he said, looking at the massive machines. "But I am curious. Why do you break down the entire asteroid, chief engineer?" Voth looked confused. "Because that is how mining works. You must process all the material to extract the valuable elements. But asteroids are not random collections of minerals," said Hyun-woo. "They formed under specific conditions. The valuable materials are concentrated in predictable patterns. You could scan for these patterns and extract only what you need. That would require incredibly advanced scanning technology," said Voth. Hyun-woo pulled out a simple device the size of his palm. "This is a gravitational field detector. We use them to find our deposits on Earth. It can identify dense materials inside solid rock. You could build one large enough to scan an entire asteroid in a few hours." The alien engineers stared at the small device they had been using: quantum field analysis and molecular resonance scanning. Complex, expensive methods that took weeks to complete. A simple gravitational scanner could do the same job in hours using technology they had possessed for centuries. Within a week, Hyunwoo had helped them redesign their entire mining operation. Instead of breaking down asteroids, they learned to extract valuable materials with surgical precision. Their efficiency increased by 300%, while their energy costs dropped by half. Meanwhile, Dr. Boram was revolutionizing the medical bay. The aliens had developed incredible healing technologies that could cure almost any disease or injury. But their treatments were slow, complex, and required patients to spend weeks in specialized chambers. Boram watched them treat a patient with cellular damage. The machine analyzed every cell in the patient's body, identified the damaged ones, and slowly repaired each one individually. The process would take 2 months. "May I suggest something?" said Boram. "Of course," replied Dr. Zenth. "The chief medical officer, your machine is doing the work that the patient's own body wants to do," she explained. "Instead of repairing each cell, why not teach the body to repair itself?" "Impossible," said Dr. Zenth. "The human body cannot repair cellular damage at this level." Boram smiled. "Actually, it can. You just need to give it the right signals." She explained how human doctors use targeted proteins to activate the body's natural healing processes. The treatment took days, instead of months, and worked better, because the body was doing what it was designed to do. Dr. Zenth was skeptical but agreed to try Boram's approach. The patient was completely healed in 5 days. The alien medical team could not believe what they had witnessed. They had been fighting against biological systems when they should have been working with them. The reports kept coming from every section of the station. Mathematician Dong Hyun had solved 3 major computational problems that alien scientists had been working on for years. He did not use quantum computers or advanced algorithms. He used basic mathematical principles that he learned in school. Physicist Woo Jin had improved their energy distribution system by 30%. He suggested using simple feedback loops instead of complex monitoring systems. The aliens realized they had been using expensive technology to do things that basic engineering could handle. Most shocking was engineer Min-ho, who had been observing their spacecraft manufacturing. He watched them build ships for a week, then politely asked why they made everything so complicated. "What do you mean?" asked the chief designer. "Your ships are amazing," said Min-ho. "But you use 1,000 different materials when you could use 50. You have backup systems for your backup systems. You have computers controlling other computers that control other computers. But this makes our ships more reliable," argued the designer. Min-ho showed them human ship designs that were simpler, but actually more reliable, because human engineers understood that more complexity meant more things that could break. They designed ships that were easy to build, easy to repair, and easy to understand. The alien designer studied the human blueprints. These ships would be faster to build, require less maintenance, and cost a fraction of their current designs. They would also be more reliable, because there were fewer systems that could fail. Ambassador Keth called another emergency meeting. The council leaders gathered with expressions of worry and confusion on their alien faces. "These humans," she said, "they are changing everything. Our most advanced technologies, our most sophisticated systems, they make them all seem primitive." "But how?" demanded General Crix from the warrior Korthak species. "We have been developing these technologies for thousands of years. We have tested them, refined them, perfected them." Counselor Nim from the Ethereal Conclave spoke with her mind voice. "Perhaps we have been perfecting the wrong things. Perhaps we have been making our solutions more complex when we should have been making them simpler." The room fell silent. This was a disturbing thought. Every species in the galaxy had followed the same pattern. As they became more advanced, their technology became more complex. Their solutions became more sophisticated. Their methods became more elaborate. The humans were suggesting that advancement meant the opposite, that truly advanced beings found simple solutions to complex problems. That intelligence was not about building bigger machines, but about understanding basic principles so well that big machines were not needed. Dr. Yan-Su continued monitoring from Earth. She could see the confusion spreading through the alien leadership. They had spent millennia believing that complex meant better, that difficult meant advanced, that sophisticated meant superior. The humans were proving them wrong with every interaction. Simple was better. Easy was advanced. Basic was superior. The paradigm shift was happening faster than anyone expected. Alien engineers were redesigning their systems using human principles. Alien scientists were abandoning complex theories in favor of simple explanations. Alien doctors were learning to work with biological systems instead of against them. But the biggest change was in how they thought about problems. Instead of asking, how can we build a machine to solve this, they were asking, what is the simplest way to solve this? Instead of adding more complexity, they were looking for ways to remove it. The revolution was not about technology, it was about thinking. And the humans were teaching the entire galaxy to think differently. 6 months after first contact, the galaxy was transforming in ways no one had predicted. The great construction projects that had defined civilizations for millennia were being redesigned using human principles. Ancient problems that had plagued species for generations were being solved with shocking simplicity. The revolution was not about technology, it was about thinking. On Council Station Prime, the most ambitious project in galactic history was about to reach its conclusion. Engineer Hyun-sik stood in the main laboratory surrounded by scientists from dozens of different species. They had all come together to witness something impossible, the creation of stable wormhole networks for instant travel between star systems. For thousands of years, this had been the ultimate dream of every spacefaring civilization. The mathematics were considered impossibly complex, the energy requirements seemed insurmountable, and every previous attempt had failed catastrophically. The theoretical framework alone had consumed the greatest minds in galactic history. Hyun-sik looked at their latest equations, filling wall displays with symbols and calculations that most beings could not even pronounce. The alien scientists had been working on this problem for centuries, adding layer upon layer of complexity to account for every possible variable. "Why are you making this so complicated?" he asked politely Dr. Vorth. The lead researcher looked shocked. "This is the most complex problem in physics. The gravitational interactions alone require 17-dimensional analyses. The quantum uncertainties multiply exponentially. The temporal distortions create paradox cascades that threaten reality itself." Hyun-sik nodded thoughtfully. "But what if you are thinking about it wrong? What if you do not create wormholes? What if you use wormholes that already exist?" The room fell silent. Natural wormholes were theoretical constructs that might exist in the deep void between galaxies. They were unstable, unpredictable, and completely useless for transportation. Hyun-sik pulled up stellar charts. "Look at these gravitational anomalies," he said, pointing to areas where space seemed to bend in unusual ways. "These are not random, they are natural, weak points in space-time. You could use them as anchor points instead of creating massive tears in reality," he explained. They could create small, stable connections between existing weak points. Instead of generating enormous amounts of energy, they could feed cosmic background energy into natural systems. Instead of building transportation tunnels, they could create communication bridges that ships could follow. The energy requirements would be minimal. He continued, "The infrastructure already exists in nature. You just need to connect the dots." Dr. Vorth stared at the charts. It was so simple it seemed impossible, but the mathematics worked. The energy calculations were reasonable, the materials were available. The construction time would be measured in months instead of centuries. 3 weeks later, the first human-designed wormhole opened between Council Station Prime and the research facility at Xerion 7. The connection was stable, clean, and used less energy than a standard. Fusion reactor ships began traveling instantly between systems that had been months apart. As the first vessels emerged from the wormhole, the assembled representatives burst into celebration. But the celebration was about more than transportation. It was about a new way of understanding problems. Dr. Haewon arrived through the wormhole as part of the first official delegation. She stepped onto Council Station Prime and found herself surrounded by representatives from species across the galaxy. All of them wanted to learn from human approaches to their most challenging problems. "Welcome to the new galaxy," said Ambassador Keth, greeting her personally. Haywan smiled, looking around at the mixture of aliens and humans working together on projects that had seemed impossible just months before. The humans had not conquered the galaxy through superior technology or military might. They had transformed it through better thinking. The changes were happening everywhere. Species that had spent millennia perfecting complex solutions were discovering simple alternatives. Civilizations that had believed advancement meant complication were learning that it meant simplification. Problems that had seemed impossibly difficult were being solved through creative approaches. On the agricultural world's human farming techniques were increasing crop yields while reducing resource consumption. The aliens had been using complex chemical processes to force plants to grow in hostile environments. Humans showed them how to modify the environments to help plants grow naturally. In the industrial sectors, human engineering was revolutionizing manufacturing. The aliens had built elaborate automated systems that could produce anything but required constant maintenance. Humans designed simpler systems that worked reliably for decades with minimal oversight. Most importantly, human education methods were spreading throughout the galaxy. Instead of memorizing vast amounts of information, students were learning how to think creatively, how to solve problems, how to ask better questions, how to see simple solutions to complex challenges. The greatest change was in how species related to each other. For millions of years, the Galactic Council had been a careful balance of competing civilizations. Each species guarded their advanced knowledge, their superior technology, their specialized expertise. Cooperation had been limited by the assumption that sharing knowledge meant losing advantage. The humans had proven this assumption wrong. By sharing simple solutions that worked better than complex secrets, they had created abundance instead of scarcity. Everyone benefited when problems were solved efficiently, when resources were used wisely. When knowledge was shared freely, Ambassador Keth stood in the council chamber watching delegates from 47 species work together on projects that would benefit. The Emergency Science Council meeting had been going on for 4 days. Representatives from 12 different species had gathered in the Great Hall of Council Station Prime. Each species had brought their greatest minds, their most advanced theories, and their most complex solutions. The problem they faced was enormous: how to create sustainable energy for the expanding galactic colonies. The Vorthak delegation presented first. Their plan involved tearing holes in space-time to access energy from parallel dimensions. The mathematics were beautiful, the theory was flawless, and the engineering requirements would take 50 years to develop. The energy output would be incredible, but the cost would bankrupt 3-star systems. The crystalline beings from Zerion had a different approach. They wanted to build massive collectors around dying stars to harvest their final energy bursts. The technology existed, but it would require dismantling entire solar systems to get enough materials. The environmental cost would be devastating. The gaseous entities from the Nebular Collective suggested something even more ambitious. They could transform entire gas giants into fusion reactors, turning planets into power sources. The energy would last for millions of years, but the process would destroy any life in those systems. Each presentation was more elaborate than the last. Each solution required resources that barely existed. Each plan would take decades to implement and cost more than most species could afford. The alien scientists were proud of their complex theories and sophisticated approaches. On the 4th day, young researcher Dong Hyun raised his hand politely. "May I show you something?" he asked. The alien scientists were exhausted. From their debates, they had been arguing about dimensional mathematics, quantum field theories, and exotic matter physics for days. A break might be helpful. "Of course," said Ambassador Keth. "Please share your thoughts." Dong Hyun walked to the presentation screen. He drew a simple diagram. It looked like something from a basic science textbook. A sphere with hydrogen going in energy and helium coming out. "This is fusion," he said simply. "We have been using it on Earth for 60 years. The alien scientists looked confused. They knew about fusion. It was primitive technology that could barely power a single planet. "But you can scale it up," continued Dong Hyun. "Instead of one big reactor, you build many small ones. Instead of trying to contain incredible temperatures, you use magnetic fields to control smaller reactions. Instead of requiring exotic materials, you use hydrogen, which is everywhere in the universe. He showed them how fusion reactors could be built in space where accidents could not hurt anyone, how the waste heat could power secondary systems, how multiple reactors could be linked together for redundancy, how the fuel was literally the most common element in existence. The best part, he said, is that we already know how to build this. We have been doing it for decades. You could have fusion power for your colonies within months, not decades. The materials are common, the technology is proven, and the cost is reasonable. The silence in the room was profound. 12 species, each convinced they were among the most intelligent in the galaxy, had just been shown a solution by what they considered a primitive species. The human approach was not more advanced. It was more practical. Dr. Zix from the Mentari Collective was the first to speak. But fusion is so simple, so basic. How can it solve our complex energy needs? Dong-hyun smiled. Sometimes simple solutions are the best solutions. Complex problems do not always need complex answers. They just need the right answers. He explained how human engineers had learned to think differently. Instead of building one enormous solution, they built many small solutions. Instead of trying to control massive forces, they used smaller forces more efficiently. Instead of requiring perfect conditions, they designed systems that worked in imperfect conditions. The alien scientist began asking questions. How much energy could fusion produce? How reliable were the reactors? How difficult was maintenance? How expensive was fuel? Each answer showed that fusion could meet their needs better than any of the complex solutions they had proposed. Engineer Su Young, who had been watching quietly, stood up to support her colleague. The problem with complex solutions, she said, is that they are fragile. When one part breaks, everything stops working. Simple solutions are robust. When one part breaks, the rest keeps working. She showed them diagrams of human power grids, multiple fusion reactors connected together. If one reactor needed maintenance, the others continued producing power. If one system failed, backup systems took over automatically. The entire network was designed to be reliable rather than impressive. General Vrex from the warrior Korthak spoke up. But surely such simple technology cannot match our advanced systems. Su Young pulled up energy output statistics. Human fusion reactors, she said, produce more power per unit cost than any system in the Galactic database. They are safer, more reliable, and easier to maintain. The only thing, they are not as complicated. The revelation was spreading through the room. These aliens had been competing to create the most sophisticated solutions, when they should have been looking for the most effective solutions. They had been showing off their intelligence instead of using their intelligence. Dr. Su Jin, attending virtually from Earth, watched the alien scientists frantically taking notes. They were learning concepts that human children studied in school, yet these concepts could solve problems that had puzzled the galaxy for generations. The paradigm shift was happening in real time. The greatest minds in the galaxy were realizing they had been overthinking everything. Their complex solutions were not better solutions. They were just harder solutions. Dong-hyun continued his presentation, showing how fusion technology could be adapted for different environments, how it could be built using materials each species already possessed, how it could be maintained by engineers with basic training, how it could be expanded as colonies grew. By the end of his presentation, the emergency meeting had become a fusion planning session. Representatives were discussing implementation schedules, resource allocation, and training programs. The crisis that had seemed impossible to solve had become a manageable engineering project. Ambassador Keth looked around the room, watching species that had been rivals become collaborators. The humans had not just solved their energy problem. They had shown them a new way to approach all problems. Instead of asking, how can we build something impressive? They were now asking, how can we build something that works? Instead of competing to create the most complex solution, they were working together to find the most effective solution. The teaching moment was complete. The galaxy had learned that intelligence was not about making things complicated. It was about making complicated things simple. And the humans were the best teachers they had ever encountered. Ambassador Kith stood in her private office staring out at the stars. She had called for a formal study to understand how human intelligence actually worked. 2 months of constant surprises had left the entire council confused and amazed. Every interaction with humans revealed new ways of thinking that seemed impossible. The study teams had been working for weeks now. Each team paired alien scientists with human observers on different projects. The results were being compiled into a report that would change everything. The galaxy thought it knew about intelligence. Dr. Yansu had arrived from Earth to oversee the human side of the study. She sat across from Keith reviewing the preliminary findings. The patterns were clear, but the implications were staggering. "Let us start with linguistics," said Keith, reading from her tablet. "Our best language experts require months to learn basic communication in a new alien language. They use advanced translation software, neural implants, and comprehensive databases. And your linguist asked Dr. Yansu Wu-jin learned 18 of our languages in 6 weeks," said Keth. "He did not use any advanced technology. He simply listened to conversations, identified patterns, and began speaking. When we asked him to explain his method, he said it was obvious how the languages worked." Yansu nodded. "This is typical. Wu-jin does not think about language learning as a complex process. He sees patterns and sounds, recognizes how grammar structures work, and understands the logic behind communication. Most humans learn languages this way, but how is this possible?" demanded Keth. "Our linguists have studied language theory for decades. They understand the mathematical principles behind communication structures. They know about phonemic analysis, syntactic parsing, and semantic mapping. Your linguists study language," said Yansu. "Humans use language. We do not analyze communication, we communicate. We do not parse syntax, we speak. The patterns are obvious when you focus on meaning instead of structure." The mathematics section was even more puzzling. Keth pulled up another report. "Our greatest mathematician, Dr. Vroth, has been working on quantum probability equations for 15 years. The mathematics are incredibly complex, requiring our most powerful computers to solve. Haijin solved them in 3 hours," said Yansu without looking at the report. She probably recognized that the equations were more complex than they needed to be, and found a simpler approach. Keth confirmed this. She reduced a 15-variable equation to a 3-variable equation. Her solution was so elegant that our computers could solve it instantly. But how did she see this simplification? Because she was not trying to impress anyone with complex mathematics, said Yansu. She was trying to solve the problem. The simplest solution that works is usually the best solution. The engineering reports were the most disturbing. Every piece of technology that humans had observed was immediately improved. Not through better materials or more advanced designs, but through better understanding of basic principles. Minho observed our gravitational drive systems, said Keth. These systems represent centuries of development by our finest engineers. He suggested modifications that increased efficiency by 40%. Let me guess, said Yeonsu. He noticed that you were fighting against natural forces instead of working with them. Human engineers learn to use physics rather than overcome physics. Exactly, said Keth. But how does he see these inefficiencies that our experts miss? Your experts are focused on making the technology work, said Yeonsu. Minho is focused on making it work better. He sees the system as a whole instead of seeing individual components. When you understand how all the parts work together, improvements become obvious. The pattern was becoming clear to Keth, but it was also becoming frightening. Humans did not just learn information. They understood it. They did not just solve problems, they saw through them. They approached every challenge with an intuitive grasp that seemed almost supernatural. The philosophy section of the report was equally revealing. Jaehun had been working with the Mentari Collective, the most advanced philosophical minds in the galaxy. They had spent centuries debating questions about existence, consciousness, and reality. In 3 weeks, said Keth. Jaehun resolved philosophical debates that have lasted for millennia. He did not use complex theoretical frameworks or elaborate logical structures. He asked simple questions that cut to the heart of each issue. What kind of questions asked? Yeonsu, questions like, Why does it matter, and what changes if we are wrong? And how does this help anyone understand? Anything better, said Keth. The Mentari philosophers realized they had been debating abstractions instead of seeking useful insights. Philosophy should help people understand their lives, said Yeon Su. If a philosophical theory does not change how you think or act, then it is just intellectual entertainment. Jae-hun focuses on practical wisdom rather than theoretical complexity. The military section was perhaps the most shocking. General Vrex had allowed strategist Su Young to observe their advanced war games. These were simulations of massive space battles involving hundreds of ships and complex tactical scenarios. Our best military minds had been working on one scenario for months, said Keth. The simulation involved defending a star system against a superior enemy force. Every strategy we developed resulted in massive casualties and probable defeat. Su Young observed for 2 days, said Yeon Su. Then she suggested a completely different approach. Instead of fighting a defensive battle, she proposed turning it into a rescue mission. The results were incredible, continued Keth. Her strategy ended the simulation in half the time with minimal casualties. She turned a hopeless military situation into a successful evacuation operation. Military thinking often gets trapped by military assumptions, said. Yeon Su Young was not thinking about how to win a battle. She was thinking about how to save lives. Sometimes the best military strategy is not military at all. The final section of the report dealt with the most advanced beings in the galaxy. The ethereal conclave were beings of pure energy who had evolved beyond physical form. They considered themselves the ultimate expression of intelligence in the universe. Even they had been humbled by human scientists Yi Jun and Yun Hee had worked with the conclave on problems of pure thought, abstract reasoning beyond anything physical beings could normally comprehend. Our evolution toward pure intellect was supposed to be the pinnacle of mental development, said Keth. But your scientists found solutions that our energy beings could not. They used their biological limitations as advantages rather than obstacles. Pure thought has its own limitations, said Yeon Su. When you remove all physical constraints, you also remove physical intuition. Biological brains evolved to solve real problems in real environments. That practical foundation helps with abstract thinking. The report was complete and the conclusions were undeniable. Humans were not more intelligent than other species in traditional ways. They did not have larger brains, faster processing power, or more knowledge storage. They had something more valuable. They had creativity. They approached every problem with fresh perspectives. They questioned assumptions that others took for granted. They combined ideas in ways that seemed impossible to more structured minds. They saw simple solutions that complex thinkers missed. The galaxy had spent millions of years developing intelligence along predictable paths, logic analysis, systematic thinking, structured reasoning. Each species had become very good at thinking in their own particular way. Humans had developed intelligence in completely unpredictable ways. Intuitive leaps, creative connections, practical wisdom, emotional insight. They could think in ways that no other species had imagined possible. Ambassador Keth finished reading the report and looked at Dr. Yeon Su. The question was no longer how humans were so smart. It was why every other species had been thinking so inefficiently. We have been trying to be intelligent, said Keth. Humans simply are intelligent. There is a difference. Yes, said Yeon Su. There is a very important difference. The emergency session of the full Galactic Council had been called for the first time in 300 years. Representatives from all 47 member species gathered in the Great Assembly Chamber on Council Prime. The question that had started with simple curiosity had become a crisis that threatened everything they thought they knew about intelligence and civilization. Chancellor Morvex called the session to order. His ancient voice carried the weight of centuries as he spoke. We are here to discuss the humans and what their presence means for our understanding of intelligence itself. The reports had been distributed to every species weeks in advance. Each delegation had studied the findings, analyzed the data, and reached the same disturbing conclusion. The humans were not just different, They represented a completely new type of intelligence that made all other forms of thinking seem limited. Dr. Zix from the Mentari Collective spoke first. My species has prided itself on philosophical wisdom. For thousands of years, we have built elaborate frameworks for understanding existence, consciousness, and reality. We thought we were the greatest thinkers in the galaxy. He paused, looking around the chamber. Then we met human philosopher Jehun. In 3 weeks, he resolved debates that have consumed our greatest minds for centuries. He did not use our sophisticated theoretical structures. He asked simple, direct questions that cut through all our complex reasoning. What kind of questions asked? Chancellor Morvik's questions like, why are we debating this, and what practical difference does this make, and how does this help anyone live better lives, said Dr. Zix. We realized that our evolution toward pure abstract thought had led us away from practical wisdom. We had become so sophisticated that we had forgotten the point of thinking. General Vrex of the Korthak stood to speak. Next, my people are warriors. We have built our entire civilization on strategic thinking, tactical brilliance, and military superiority. We thought we understood conflict better than any species in the galaxy. The general activated a holographic display showing battle simulations. Our war colleges have trained generals for centuries using increasingly complex scenarios. Our strategies account for thousands of variables. Our tactics are refined through constant analysis. He changed the display to show new simulations. Then human strategist Su Young observed our exercises. In 2 days, she found approaches that made our centuries of military thinking look primitive. She did not use superior technology or advanced analysis. She simply thought about the problems differently. How differently, asked the Chancellor. She focused on objectives instead of methods, said General Virex. When we saw a military problem, she saw a human problem. When we planned for battle, she planned for survival. When we thought about winning, she thought about what winning actually meant. Her strategies were more effective because they were more human. Engineer Prime Zalon of the Constructor Guild presented next. My species builds the largest structures in the galaxy. We have created stations that house millions, space habitats that span solar systems, engineering projects that last for millennia. We thought we were the ultimate builders. The hologram showed massive construction projects spanning decades and requiring entire civilizations' worth of resources. Our projects are marvels of engineering precision. Each component is perfectly designed. Every system is optimized for maximum efficiency. Then human engineer Minho observed our latest project, said Zaylon. In 1 week, he identified improvements that reduced construction time by 60%, cut material costs in half, and made the final structure more reliable. He did not suggest better technology. He suggested better thinking. What did he suggest? Asked Chancellor Morvex. He asked why we were building it. So complicated, said Zaylon. He showed us that we were using 1,000 components where we needed 50. Creating backup systems for backup systems, designing solutions to problems we had created ourselves. We were building impressive structures instead of effective structures. High scientist Kular from the Research Dominion spoke from her energy field. My species has devoted itself entirely to scientific advancement. We have probed the deepest mysteries of quantum mechanics, explored the furthest reaches of theoretical physics, discovered principles that other species cannot comprehend. She displayed complex equations and dimensional charts. Our laboratories use technology that bends reality itself. Our experiments require resources from multiple star systems. Our theories explain phenomena that exist beyond normal space and time. Yet, said Kular, human physicist Yi Jun solved 3 of our most challenging problems in his first week. He did not use our advanced equipment or exotic materials. He used basic principles that he learned in what humans call high school. His solutions were more elegant than our complex theories. The pattern was becoming clear to everyone in the chamber. Each species had developed intelligence in a specific direction: logic, analysis, construction, philosophy, warfare. Each had become very good at their particular type of thinking, but they had also become limited by their particular type of thinking. They could only see solutions that fit their established patterns. They could only approach problems using their familiar methods. They had become trapped by their own expertise. The humans were different. They did not have one type of intelligence. They had many types: logical, intuitive, creative, practical, analytical, emotional. They could shift between different ways of thinking depending on what each problem required. Most importantly, they questioned everything. They did not assume that complex problems required complex solutions. They did not believe that advanced technology was always better than simple technology. They did not think that sophisticated approaches were superior to practical approaches. Ambassador Keth stood to present the final analysis. The humans have shown us that intelligence is not about how much you know or how advanced your technology is. Intelligence is about how effectively you can solve problems, how creatively you can approach challenges, how clearly you can see through complications to find simple solutions. She activated a display showing comparison charts. In every area we have tested, humans excel, not because they are more knowledgeable, but because they think more flexibly. They adapt their thinking to each situation instead of forcing each situation to fit their thinking. The most shocking revelation came from the ethereal conclave beings of pure energy, who had abandoned physical form entirely, spoke through their collective consciousness. We believed that evolution toward pure thought was the ultimate achievement. We transcended biology, chemistry, physics itself to become living intelligence. Yet the humans, with their biological brains and chaotic thought processes, find solutions that we cannot. Their physical limitations give them advantages we lost when we became pure energy. They understand reality in ways that pure thought cannot access. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Every species had believed they were evolving toward higher intelligence by becoming more specialized, more sophisticated, more complex. The humans suggested the opposite, that true intelligence came from remaining flexible, creative, and practical. Chancellor Morvex spoke for all of them. The question is, what do we do with this knowledge? Do we continue our current paths, or do we learn from the humans? The answer was already forming in minds across the chamber. For the first time in galactic history, species began to consider that they might have been evolving in the wrong direction. That advancement might mean simplification instead of complication. That intelligence might be about asking better questions instead of finding more complex answers. The humans had not just made first contact, they had started a revolution in thinking that would reshape the entire galaxy.